My name is Amir Kessler. I'm the Director of Product Management at a company called Cover. What we do at Cover is help companies make cyber decisions in a financially quantified way. And I'll explain what this means in the next slide. So the premise of what we're going to talk about is how big the threat of cyber is currently in this world. The fact that there are so many businesses, almost every business, that are very much dependent on technology, on third-party providers, and in general on a digital network, presents such a big risk for the industry from cyber events. Almost every company in the world is potentially exposed to a cyber event. And therefore, it's no wonder that cyber incidents and cyber threats are currently in the top threats that occupy board members, executives, C-levels, from any other type of risk that there is. So from this, queuing. From the survey that we're seeing here, you can see that cyber incidents is really in the top of all potential threats that occupy different board members and different executives in different companies in the world. Why is it that cyber is so threatening on one hand, and on the second hand is very hard to manage and to communicate inside the company? So nowadays, what we're seeing in more and more companies is that CROs and CISOs that understand the cyber risk are having a hard time to communicate this risk to board members or to their executives. Given this communication problem, it's very hard for companies to articulate their cyber exposure in financial terms and to really understand what will be the impact of a cyber incident on the company. It's very hard to justify their cyber budget request because it's very hard to calculate the ROI, the return on investment for such an investment for security controls. And it's very hard to understand and be confident around what is the right amount of cyber insurance and type of cyber insurance that companies need. And why is that? Why is that specifically for the cyber risk, it's so hard to communicate, to understand the ROI, and to understand what type of insurance is needed? So there are many factors and reasons why cyber risk is so different than any other risk. I listed here a few of those, and I think the top left one is really the most interesting one. First and foremost, cyber threats are very, very technical. To understand the threat, you need to understand what are vulnerabilities, what are exploits, what are ransomwares. A lot of words and a lot of concepts that most executives don't really understand. Second, there is no clear way to measure the risk or to measure the exposure of cyber. Currently, what we're seeing for most companies, it's a very subjective judgment that has to do with abstract rating, subjective ideas about what is more risky than other. And on top of all of this, it's very, very slow. It's hard to collect the data that you need to understand your cyber risk. It's hard to get the market context, and it's very hard to scale, given that the company grows and the threat goes accordingly. So all of these factors contribute to the fact that nowadays cyber risk is very hard to manage and to really understand its magnitude. What we do at Cover is we tackle that and we solve this problem exactly. We help enterprises understand their cyber risk in financial terms. So we translate the risk, which is nowadays more presented as an abstract score or abstract concepts, into real financial monetary values. So translating, we are in high risk into if something will happen to us, it will cost us $10 million, and there's a 5% probability of it happening to us. And part of the reasons of how we can do this is by utilizing data that we get from Microsoft. So we are a member of MISA. We're also part of the Microsoft for Startup program, and we are Mac eligible. And all of this helps us better utilize all of the data that we're getting from Microsoft, which is crucial to understand the cyber exposure. So to be a bit more specific, what we do, we help you become more cyber resilient with really less data, only with the Microsoft data that you already have. We utilize solutions such as the Microsoft Security Score, the Defender for Cloud, Defender for Office, any type of Defender. We take all of this data and all of this information, we translate that into financially quantified insights. So we will see this in the demo, but we translate all of the data from Microsoft into what I explained, actual monetary terms of your risk. So again, translating this into there's a risk of $10 million from a ransomware, and this data can be used to make executive cyber decisions. So once your cyber risk is translated into monetary terms, it's much easier to justify budget, because you can know if this budget is higher or lower than the risk, which is also in monetary terms. It's easier to prioritize cyber investments, because it's very clear each investment, how much it will save in a quantified way from the risk. It's easier to understand about your cyber insurance and optimize it, and really makes the entire process of risk management much smoother. And this is why we believe that cybersecurity is currently evolving into cyber risk management. We're not only trying to prevent events from happening, but rather to manage the risk, to understand it, and to make smart and informed decisions given this information, this quantified information about the risk. Now, just a few words or a few sentences about how we do this. In order to create an assessment, in order to translate your risk into financial terms, we first of all want to understand the enterprise. We want to understand the company structure, the network structure, how much data the company has, what industry the company operates in. All of this helps us to better understand what is the risk. On top of that, there's the cyber intelligence, which we mostly get from Microsoft. So like I said, Microsoft Defender, Microsoft Sentinel, all of the data that is gathered by these solutions is fed into our model, and we utilize it to understand the security posture. And the last piece is the insurance intelligence. So Cover, beside helping enterprises optimize and manage their cyber risk, we also help insurance companies understand their risk around cyber insurance. And the fact that we serve some of the biggest insurance companies in the world really helps us to better validate and calibrate our model using these relationships. So to be a bit more specific, we get claims data, as an example, from the insurance companies that we work with. So they have the companies that they insure. These companies trigger a claim, and we get the data about what exactly happened and how much did they claim for, which really gives us a unique visibility into what's going on in the world, how many companies are actually suffering from cyber events, and also how much it actually costs. We use that to calibrate and to better develop our models. And we also run our model on huge hundreds of millions size of companies' portfolios of the insurance companies, which we can validate our model on. So this relationship with the insurance companies really provides us with the confidence and validation that we need to develop our models. So having said that, I think this is a good place to move to the demo and show you how the product looks like. Okay, so welcome to Quantum, Cover's platform for cyber risk quantification. And what we're seeing here in the first screen is a list or a table. And this list in our demo environment is just a list of demo companies. But what we would see in regular companies or in our clients, for our clients, is a list of different product lines or subsidiaries or regions or any way that the company wishes to break down the company and the granularity to run a quantification on. So the quantification doesn't have to happen on the company as a whole, but it could happen on smaller granularities or really break down the company. What we do as a first step, I'll show the input before we'll go to the output. Like I said, we need to understand how the company looks like. And we do this by using what we call the company sphere. So we have our own representation of the company structure, and we need to have some information about the endpoints in the company, the infrastructure, the cloud, and also the security profiles and security controls. And the different information that we need for each of these categories can be listed, it can be seen here. So information like the operating systems that are being used and technologies, access to sensitive data. There are not a lot of questions. And for each of these bubbles that we call asset groups, these questions, they repeat themselves. It's exactly the same. And the idea is that you can create as many asset groups as you want and just answer differently. So if for my company in the product, we have specific technologies and operating systems being used, there might be different answers for the operations department. So again, same set of questions, only different answers. And under the security profile, what we need to understand is the security posture of the company. We're utilizing different security frameworks for that. So in this example, we're seeing NIST CSF, but we're also utilizing other ones like CIS or whatever our client needs. And we want to understand for each of the controls, what is the maturity level? And for each of the controls, what is the maturity level? And also to which of the asset groups this configuration is correct. So let's say that this specific configuration of this control being in this level or in this level and so forth is only true for 13 asset groups, not for all of them, but just for a subset of them. I can create another security profile if I wish and have a different configuration and associate that with the rest of the asset groups. So this way, we have a very good understanding of the technologies that are being used in the company, the network structure, and also the security control implementation. Now, it's very important to say that for most of our clients, specifically the ones that have Microsoft products, there is no manual process of creating this sphere. What usually happens is that this is automatically generated just by using the Microsoft API. We get the API and we automatically create this sphere and answer all of the questions from the Sentinel, Defender, and all the other products, Microsoft products that we use. So this is the way that this is a really good manifestation of the way that we use all of the Microsoft data. Now, this was more around the input, and let's move to talk about the output. I'll start with this tab. The gist of everything that we're doing can really be seen in this component, in this distribution here. And it's really the heart of everything, and everything else on the platform kind of derives from this. And what we're seeing here is the actual quantification of this company. So we can't quantify the risk in one single number because that will involve predicting the future in a very accurate way, which is generally impossible. So what we do, we create a distribution of different magnitudes of loss associated with different probabilities. And the way to read this graph is the following. The probability of this company to experience a 10 million damage or higher next year from cyber events is 24%. But the probability of experiencing 77 or 80 million damage from cyber events is around 1%. So we're giving here the full distributions of what can go wrong and what is the probability of it going wrong in that magnitude. The reason why we have a full distribution is because our model is based on a Monte Carlo simulation. The Monte Carlo simulation, what it does is simulates next year 10,000 times. Each of the simulated years is very different from the other. In one simulated year, we can have a very severe cyber event, whilst in another simulated year, we can have no events or a few small ones. Now, the distribution or the Monte Carlo simulation is derived from everything that we learned about the company. If the company is in an industry that tends to have a lot of data attacks, data breach attacks, such as the healthcare industry, so we will see in the simulation more data breach events. If the company doesn't have a very good security posture, like we've seen in the input part, this will affect the simulation, and we will see more events given the low posture of the company. So this is really a summary or aggregation of everything we know about the company, both from the industry context, but also from what we learned about the company itself, from the structure, from the technologies, and from the security controls. Of course, just having this graph is not enough, and we want to go further and further explain where this damage is coming from. And the first way that we do this is by categorizing the different damages into impact scenarios. So impact scenarios, these 6, is the end of the attack, is if an attack were to occur, what would be the actual impact on the company? Is it business interruption, meaning the company network is down, or maybe it's a data theft, or it could be ransomware. So there's this list of 6 here that really bucket everything that can happen to the company, regardless of the attack vector, regardless of the propagation methods, regardless of many other parameters that could define the attacks. At the end, they end in one of these 6 results. And for this company, what we can very obviously see is that business interruption would be the main driver of loss. This will be the main impact that could cause actual damage to the company. We also specify what type of damage will be under the business interruption, whether it's forensics that the company would need to do, recovery expenses, lost income, IP loss, damages, outage damages. All of them are categorized under this impact. And for different companies, the distribution between the different impact scenarios is, of course, very different. There's also the option to click on it to learn more and to see some example events, but we don't have a lot of time for the demo, so I will move on. Besides just understanding the risk and just seeing it here in a quantified way, another way that you can use the quantification is to make decisions regarding future investments. So what we do is when we run the simulation, we actually run a lot of other simulations at the same time. And in each of these additional simulations, what we do is simulate what would happen if the company would decide to invest in different security controls and take them one level up. And I'll explain what I mean. So let's say we're looking at this control, which is a control that is described here using the NIST CSF framework. And the company currently have this control in managed level. And the question is, what will be the implication of taking this control and moving it up to the next maturity level, which is defined as optimized by the NIST framework? If the company would decide to do this, to move from managed to optimized, the company would save around 1.62% of the quantification. So we can know now what will be the result of an investment. Furthermore, we actually show you which of the different asset groups where in the company you need to move from managed to optimized, because usually security controls are not evenly distributed across the company. And the last piece here is that if you know what will be the cost of such a change, how much it will cost us to move from managed to optimize, you can input this cost here and you can see the ROI. Very direct and very easy to understand. So this little feature, even though it's quite easy to calculate, you just need to compare this number to this number, is actually the top feature that our clients usually use, given that it could be really used as is to get budget. So we have many use cases, clients that were having hard time to get budget for specific security controls, but by showing the very obvious ROI, they could convince and justify such an investment. So another very important way that you can use the quantification is for cyber insurance. Cyber insurance, a lot of people in the industry has probably already felt, is just becoming more and more expensive every year. This is what is called in the insurance industry market hardening. As part of this market hardening, the premiums are going up while the limits are going down. And given that insurance, cyber insurance, any type of insurance is defined or expressed using financial terms, comparing it to the risk in financial terms is very natural. So what we're seeing here, for example, is taking the policy terms and conditions of this company, specifically the limit and the deductible, and projecting it on the quantification that we calculated. So first of all, you can already see what of the entire exposure is covered by the insurance company and what is not. The dark purple is the part that the insurance company covers, and the light purple is the part that it doesn't. And furthermore, you can explore and see which of the different coverages that is part of the policy are actually contributing to you and which are not. So in many cases, what we see is that some of the coverages tend to not make sense compared to the terms and conditions. In this case, for example, the limit in the deductible could be even out of scope or much higher than the actual exposure, and therefore this company has the potential to optimize their policy and maybe remove some of the coverages, given that it doesn't really make sense or that it's not very probable for the company to ever use this coverage. So this is around the optimization. The last piece that I would like to also mention is around third-party risk. So as part of our model, we don't only model first-party attacks and cyber attacks and hacks or anything like that. We also model third-party events. So third-party failures, outages, data leaks of third-party, and anything around that. So what the purpose of this tab is to focus only on these types of events and to show you how much your company is exposed to third party compared to your overall exposure. So for this company, as an example, it's very clear that third-party events is not the main driver of loss, but it's still significant. And for these third-party events, data breach is more significant than provider interruption. Furthermore, what we can do, we can drill into the different vendors and third-party vendors that the company is using and show for each of those what exactly is the likelihood of an event happening around or involving this specific vendor. And if something would have happened, what will be the associated loss that we predict from experiencing problem with this vendor. Now, of course, the number that we get to, the actual impact, is very much derived on how much the company is reliant on this vendor. So if you have a vendor that even if it has a very high likelihood of being attacked or experiencing an outage, if the company is not using this vendor in an important production way, it won't be a very dramatic impact on the company. So that concludes the demo. And I'll go back to the slides to just show you one more slide. So thank you, everyone, for participating and listening. If you want to learn more about us, about Cover, and about Quantum, our product, you have two options. So we are on the Microsoft Marketplace. You can use your Mac credits to get access to Quantum, or if you prefer, you can scan the QR code that you're seeing here, and you'll get a direct access into the demo environment of Cover, where you can play around with the product and get to know it. Thank you again, and goodbye.